Hi, everyone. This is Kellen Lynch, the network weaver at Housing Solutions Network in Jefferson County, Washington. Today, we're going to talk with Fred Kimball, one of our lead volunteers within the network, about how to fill out a permit for an accessory dwelling unit. All right. So, Fred, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into what it is we're doing here?
Yeah, I'm Fred Kimball. I've been a licensed contractor around Jefferson County here for over 30 years, retired the last couple of years, and have been focusing on my volunteer efforts with affordable housing efforts. I've also had a cabinet shop that we ran, and I lost track of the number of houses I built, but it's a fair number, and the number of building permits we went through is rather extensive also. So hopefully we can be some help for people to help them expedite their process.
Yep, exactly. And that's the whole point of this video series. The Permit Navigator video series is an effort to reduce the stress, reduce the burden on the folks submitting these building permits so that we can create housing a little bit easier here in Jefferson County, hopefully take the weight and the backlog at least a little bit off of the city and county, and really just expedite this process. As Fred said previously in a conversation, we're trying to share this secret knowledge. It shouldn't be secret, right? It shouldn't be so complex to fill out a building permit so that you need only professionals doing it. But given that that is the case right now, we're going to try and help out. So today, as mentioned before, we're going to look at specifically building permits for ADUs. Now you can find out where to even find this document, this permit file, in our previous videos, whether that's for the city of Port Townsend or for Jefferson County. You can look at our previous videos on our website, housingsolutionsnetwork.org, or on our YouTube channel. Just look up Housing Solutions Network. Please give us feedback on these videos or on any topics you'd like to see in the future. I'd like to send a shout out to the Rotary Club here in Port Townsend, which has funded some of our efforts with the HSN Permit Navigator video series, specifically for ADUs. So thank you to the Rotary Club. So Fred, where are we going to start with this permit navigating process?
Well, essentially, the process starts really with a standard building permit application. The city has them posted on their website, and I believe it's a 2-page document with a checklist of things that they want to see in that document or on a set of plans that you have to submit. We're, as Kellen has said, we're trying to stress that to make this this process go as smoothly as possible for you. And when it goes smooth for you, then it goes smooth for the folks behind the permit counter who you'll meet. And when that happens, then there isn't a lot of back and forth between the building department and the customer as to what information was lacking. And that's one of the big hangups with how come a building permit takes so long, is they don't get complete packages, and this constant back and forth communication not only kicks you back in the queue, but it just takes time. They leave a message for you, you leave a message for them, and then everybody starts to get frustrated, and that's really where we're trying to come in, is to make sure that everybody's working smoothly and in sync. So
Right. Yeah, we're trying to enable folks to submit full sets of plans, if at all possible. And it can be confusing. There's a lot of different pieces on these plans, even though they're just 2 pages. So while we will go through the actual document and share that with you all, is there anything else you'd like to add at the top, Fred, of just, what is expected? Like, where should you be at if you're considering filling out a building permit for an ADU?
You can start filling out the application fairly quickly, but you're going to get bogged down if you don't have a complete set of plans that have been developed, because they're going to ask for uh, lot sizes, impervious surface sizes, areas, building footprint sizes, and then you get onto the building plans themselves. And there's a lot of things I like to look for that really addresses life safety sort of issues. Smoke detector locations, rise and run on steps, things that can sound daunting to somebody that's not a trained professional in this, but it's not rocket science. And if you break it down piece by piece, it's pretty doable for a lot of folks. It can be time consuming, and it can be confusing. But here again, we're working towards eliminating that confusion.
That's right. Okay, so I'm going to share our screen and pull up the building permit doc for City of Port Townsend. All right, Fred, are you seeing this as well?
Yep, I can see it. Just great. So it's it's an application. It's addresses and tax parcel numbers, description of the project, the owner, applicant's name and address, the contact. If you happen to be using an architect or building contractor, those are the names that would go down there. Lender information. Then you start to get into how many square feet of is the project on the first floor, second floor, etc. Garages, carports, decks, and that sort of stuff. Then you get down to once you've got all that down, the lot size. Lot sizes sometimes are going to be kind of approximate because not everybody has a surveyed lot. But you should be able to come up with some square footage on your lot size from possibly the tax assessor, the county tax assessor, or even on their website. You can use their measuring tool to come up with a lot size.
Fred, does this have to be like perfect and exact, or is there room, especially on that lot size, or even with the square feet? What if you're pulling this square footage from the plans you drew up, but maybe it can change a little bit.
The information, the building information should be a pretty hard number because it should come right off of your building plans.
Okay.
The lot size, the smaller your lot size, the more critical it becomes to be accurate, because as you can see, they're kind of adding up square footages of building coverage or ground coverage and making a percent of that out of on the lot for impervious surface coverage.
Right.
And that then drive what that's all about is stormwater. You have to deal with the stormwater that falls on your site, on site, and if you get to the magic number, I believe is 40%. If you exceed 40%, then you're going to need engineering help to try to figure out how to deal with the stormwater on site to get it to soak into the ground.
So if your building footprint of both your main house and your ADU equals 40% of the total lot?
Correct. Okay. It's also the size of it also includes your driveway, any sidewalk that you have from your driveway, decks they add into that impervious area,
Wow.
patio. So it can add up pretty quick. If a standard 5,000 square foot lot that's 50 by 100, the city requires 2 off-street parking spots. Well, right there you lose close to 400 square feet. So
will you say that again about the parking?
So I'm just picking some numbers. So if you have a standard city lot is either the smallest is 50 by 100. which is 5,000 square feet. Wholly independent of how big your house is, your decks, and your ADU, right off the bat, if you have 2 off-street parking spots, you've lost 400 square feet of surface area because that's impervious. So now you're down to 4,600 square feet. And if you have 1,000 square foot house, 40% of 5,000 is 2,000 square feet. So sometimes it's hard to hit that 2,000 square feet if you have putting a lot of stuff on it, if that makes sense.
I think it lost me a little bit along the way, which I think stresses why it's so important to have this kind of spelled out and work with designers. Well, and
another way to look at it is if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, 40% of that is 2,000 square feet. That 2,000 square feet of impervious area is including your building footprint. Right. And remember, that's just your footprint. It doesn't include second and third floors. It includes your garage. It includes if you have a carport. It includes sidewalks. It includes your any kind of parking areas that are off street, decks. So 2,000 square feet goes away pretty quick. In that 10,000 square foot lot, which is typical in an R1 zone, is you have 4,000 square feet to deal with that can be impervious. So your comfort level goes up there. And probably with an ADU would most likely you can get them in on an R1 lot without worrying about what you're doing with the runoff. But on those R2 lots, the 5,000 square foot lots, it can be a squeeze.
Yeah, that does make sense. And so just to reiterate here, how, beyond looking at the tax assessor's, online database for the city, how do folks, go about getting these numbers? Are they pulling them directly off of professionally produced plans, or is it going to be clear to them, where to get this information just for page 1?
Just for page 1, the building information will come off of your plans, whether they've been drawn up by an architect or whether you've drawn them up at home or by a hired draftsman. That's where you get the square footage of your building footprint and the other square foot you're looking for. The lot size, they're going to be, I found it more and more likely that they're going to want to know where the surveyed corners are. It comes into play in a couple ways. One of them is actually figuring out how big your lot is, and the other is when you start dealing with building setbacks from property lines. That if you're not quite sure where your property line is, they're going to be questioning how you're going to be able to locate your project on that lot and not be into the setbacks.
Right, and those setbacks will come up again later, and those really do matter. Seems like especially with ADUs.
Correct.
Great. And so you mentioned that there are local designers and drafters that can draft these plans. Folks are also attempting to do this themselves. What are your thoughts on that as someone that's filled out a lot of these permits and built a lot of houses? What do you see as the most conducive way to building an ADU?
The path of least resistance and the path of highest cost is obviously hiring a design professional to do your plans. If you're so inclined to draw your own plans, the devil becomes in the detail. In the details. I mean, the city has lots of sort of details, architectural details that you can gather up, but at a certain point, having to stagger through the latest building code can become rather daunting because it's not written for, it's written by lawyers instead of builders, or written by somebody to understand easily on a sort of a non-professional level. So
Right.
it gets confusing to read the building code.
Okay. Yeah. So moving on to kind of the nitty gritty here under the checklist, they put together this checklist to really make sure that folks are submitting complete permits. But I have a feeling that a lot of folks do not know how to answer these questions, especially if they're trying to go it their own way and do it themselves. Where do you want to start with this?
Well, the top box says you should be aware.
Yeah.
Uh, they obviously have pointed out some items that have confused people in the past, and the daylight plane is one that that's a hard one to explain. It's about not blocking solar access to your neighbor excessively. I mean, they're aware of that. They don't want somebody building a 30-foot high building 5 feet in from their property line and eclipsing all the light that is going to shine onto your neighbor's either house or potential house. And so they've created some, I think somewhere in their information they have a drawing of this that sort of explains the math and how you get to this understanding with the daylight plane. But it really goes to the root of the design of the building, and not so much the sort of the hard, dimensions and where doors are and where windows are and stuff. It's
in some cases, an ADU can be a new dwelling. It can also be an addition, right?
correct. Can also be a remodel.
Right.
Whereas the Washington State Energy Code is insulation values and ventilation, air quality stuff for homes in Washington, homes and businesses in Washington. So it also comes into play sort of early on in the design process, as far as making sure that you have enough thickness in your roof system to get the insulation required. The engineering may say that you can put a 2x4 rafter up there and span it, but if you need 10 inches of insulation, you can't get that in a 2x4 thickness.
Right.
So that's where that's at. And then we get into this list of they require 2 sets of plans, and basically what they're doing with 2 sets of plans is when the building plans examiner examines them, he makes the red lines and the notes on both sets of plans. One of them stays in the office. One of them is returned to the customer, and that set of plans that has the red lines on it and the approval stamp is what's posted at the job site, so that when the building inspector comes out, the approved plans are there, and he can check to make sure that what is being built according to the plans that were approved.
Okay.
So then it kind of breaks down the whether each one of these sections is a page in your set of plans. It kind of depends upon how large a footprint and how big the paper is that you're printing your plans on. I think the ADU that we have as an example on is printed on 11 by 17 paper. But oftentimes you'll see plans on 24 by 30 or whatever the size is, and they may have the site plan on it and maybe the foundation plan. But they're laying out the items that they want on this plan, and you can go down this list, and some of them get a little location and diameter of existing trees. Sometimes that won't matter really. with an ADU that's, if you've got no trees on your property, you can't put them on there. Or if there's, 2 trees in the far corner and the opposite end of the world is where you're building the ADU. It's information they want, but isn't really that necessary. Critical areas and boundaries and buffers. That's going to come into play. The city has large overlay maps of wetlands and geologic hazards, and there are rules about where you can build in relationship to them. And that can get complicated also, trying to figure out the different buffer distances. And by the time, if you've crossed the path of having to deal with buffer zones around critical areas, you're probably going to be down the line of having a design professional help you, because they generally, you're not going to define your own wetland. You're going to have a wetland expert define the wetland. And so, they'll be out there and they'll map that for you, and the buffers. So foundation plan, they pretty much lay out what they want, and I'm working off of memory, but I believe they have examples in their collection of PDFs. If not, there's pretty good information in the building code about that, but not necessarily drawn examples. That would be what you would typically see on a set of plans. Yeah, so you can. This would be a typical floor plan with the information that they would be looking for. You can see that they have smoke detector locations, all the dimensioning. Dimensions. There's kind of 2 levels of dimensions: the dimensions that the building department needs, but then there's also dimensions that the guy that has to put it together needs, and they aren't necessarily what the building department doesn't care if the carpenter gets confused. But you need to make sure there's distances to windows and that sort of information. But you can also see where they've labeled egress windows, windows with vents, bathroom fans, and the capacity of the bathroom fan. That's a Washington State Energy Code item. Something like this, what you'll see, I'm sure that if this was turned in and came back, you would see red lines with, they would be calling out straps on the water heater. Right there, the water heater. They also, they point out the, let's see, I don't think we have it. Some windows, if you can scroll down to the front door, we can take a look at, there aren't any windows when windows get close to a doorway, some of them will need to be tempered glass, so that if you were to trip going in and out of the door and reach out and you don't put your hand through a piece of glass, it's going to cut you. There's some rules about that. But this doesn't seem to have any windows that are close by. Has the types of windows. One pile of information that you see is the different notes on the braced wall lines. Braced walls are part of the seismic stability of the building. That's what creates, in the case of an earthquake, it keeps the building from shaking apart or potentially shaking apart. Every wall, there's rules for it. Essentially, if you have a 4-foot sheet of plywood within 8 feet of the corner, you don't, you hit a point on the prescriptive path for seismic and wind loading. And that, for every 25 feet of wall, there has to be 2 of those, I believe. If you can't do that, then you get into some engineered corners with either, not that I'm promoting any one type of hardware, but Simpson Hardware makes a bolts into place. But when you do that, then you have to have the appropriate anchor bolts in the foundation. So all that is kind of thought out during the design process. And if you have a real complicated building, the engineer, a lot of architects won't engineer, do the structural bit. They'll turn it over to a structural engineer, and he gets to have his way with the building. And then, then it becomes a battle of making the engineering fit in with the architecture, or vice versa. Hopefully, since we're trying to focus on ADUs for affordable housing, we're not doing a lot of non-prescriptive buildings that require complicated engineering to be built. You'll see it tall. If you were to have a 3-story high ADU, there would be a lot of engineering involved because you're dealing with wind loads, and then the seismic load increases, doesn't increase, but what happens to the building increases as you go up into the air.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is a fairly simple structure, well designed, but simple ADU. Hopefully wouldn't require too much extra engineering, just to keep costs down and affordability as part of the picture here.
Right. Right. And there are, once you, the building permit or single family residence is essentially the same. When you're making an ADU, then there are some other rules that you have to hit. They don't, design wise, I believe they don't want to have 2 front doors facing the street.
Mm-hmm.
So that the life safety guys, again, the EMTs or the fire department, don't get confused about which building to go to. So that, and there again, the city has their handouts that address some of that, mm-hmm. and some of it can be caught in the review process, and the simple things that might be missed. They aren't going to kick out a set of plans because you forgot a smoke detector. Mm-hmm. They'll redline it, and and often they'll paste onto the set of plans, the guidelines for building a set of stairs, the rise and run, and the detail of how high does the handrail have to be off the nose of the stairs and that sort of stuff.
Right. So if we return to the checklist, and we've gone through what the site plan needs to show, just the basics of property lines and all of that. Went over the foundation plan. We just went over a good bit of the floor plan. This was for a simple space. I think we touched on most all of these.
Yep.
And
see, the wall section, that's one of the details that they want to see of mm-hmm. how what the wall is going to be constructed out of. It's a cross section of the wall, so it'll show on a typical 2x6 wall, it would show a 2x6 bottom plate, double 2x6 top plates, sheathing, exterior siding, thicknesses, interior wall coverings, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Along with, it would be, then oftentimes you'll see floor joist size and spacing on the floor plan itself, wall stud size and spacing, you'll see in the wall section. Header sizes will be shown, typically are shown in the on the floor plan, so that as somebody's framing it, you'll see the size header that needs to go over a window or a door. Mm-hmm. is again, some of this stuff is you want this information so that you can, so that you're not designing as you go out in the field.
Hmm.
That somebody can build it with the information that's on that set of plans. I think that's one way to look at this. Is my guess is that people that are going to attempt to draw their own set of plans are also going to be savvy enough to put that building together. And so instead of so having the information on a set of plans does nothing but help you expedite the building process without having to guess at what you were thinking as you're looking at the back of that envelope. So
with someone, as ignorant as myself coming into this, it seems like it would really benefit me to find someone that was willing to, draft this for me and be the professional in the room and really go through it. I think it seems like it would just make the whole process easier and, of course, more expensive in the short run, but probably save a lot of stress.
Yes. I mean, I don't want to be one that promotes architectural services necessarily, but having the design professional go through and draw up a set of plans, unless you have a good amount of experience in this, is going to save just a heap of time and a heap of investigating what needs to be done, and will definitely slide your way through the permitting process a lot easier than a sort of hand drafted set of plans that has erasure marks over it that you keep remembering to add things. And in this day and age, with the computer drafting systems that they have, you don't see any mistakes in dimensioning because the computer won't let you be wrong. But it's easy to do math mistakes if you're hand drawing something, and I can remember doing that, when you're adding up, 11'9" and 6'7" and 12'8". It's sometimes it's not hard to make a mistake.
Mm.
It's done.
Right. Yeah, I don't mean to advocate for, the services either if you don't need them, but we seem to be in a situation where they're largely demanded just by the state of the situation that we're in with what city and county requires. But of course, we're always aiming towards affordable workforce housing as much as possible here, and ADUs can do a lot for that in way of local affordable rentals. And we're trying to ease that process for folks as best we can.
And as if you look at just from a budgeting sort of standpoint, if you're building a small ADU, it's in the order of magnitude 300 or 400 or 500 square feet. Where the total construction cost, could be $100,000. If all of a sudden you're spending $3,000 or $4,000 on design work, that makes that project $4,000 more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal isn't necessarily to add expense to these projects where we're trying to make them affordable and help out our current housing situation.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a CAM, you need to have a pretty good concept of what you're trying to do. You can't go down there and say, I want to build an ADU and here's my lot. What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
They aren't going to get into the design process with you. But if you go down there and have a sketch of here's my lot, I want to put a XYZ size structure back here. What do you think, guys? What are the issues we're facing? And I'm going to guess that a lot of ADUs really aren't going to need a CAM. if you understand the rules for ADUs, the parking requirements, know where your utilities are coming from. The city currently requires that ADUs hook up to the utilities that are already existing. So you have to run the sewer line to the sewer line that feeds your house, not out to the street to the sewer main. And the same with the water hookup.
And I think what folks will often wonder is, how much can they do themselves, or how much should they know ahead of time if they are still going to seek, professional assistance for design? What can they do ahead of that? And I think just getting familiar with what the restrictions are, what they're getting themselves into, this overall size of the ADU that they're going to be wanting to design, it can't exceed 800 square feet in the city. So really getting that kind of those basics down before approaching a designer could be very helpful, it seems, to streamlining that process further.
Yeah. Being able to provide as much information, real information, to your design professional just keeps them from having to look at the zoning map and go, okay, yeah, this address is an R2. So the more hard information that you can provide to anybody that's doing the plan set, just shortens the length of time that they're going to have to work on it, which is going to equate into time is money sort of deal.
Well, I think we can leave it there for now, and hopefully this has been somewhat helpful to someone out there looking at building an ADU in Port Townsend. And we'll continue filming these Permit Navigator videos, and please send us feedback. Please send us video ideas. We'd love for this to be helpful for you all. And thank you to Fred so much for volunteering with HSN and leading us through this.
Well, thanks for having me, Kellen. It's always fun.
It is. All right. Thanks so much.